Welcome to the debate. We are walking the long, dark corridors of Blackwood Academy today, an isolated boarding school founded way back in 1898, steeped in a history characterized by both faded grandeur and, well, documented tragedy.
And right into that atmosphere steps Elara, a new student whose guiding principle is strict empirical logic. She's immediately confronted by an environment thick with student legends, phenomena that seem to defy her scientific outlook.
Exactly, that collision logic meeting legend. That's really the heart of our material here.
The official institutional history, it admits to serious unresolved tragedies, epidemics, accidents, and even these mysterious disappearances. Yet when students tell detailed stories of restless spirits, the school dismisses them entirely.
Which forces our central question: when documented historical tragedy intersects with persistent student folklore and these frankly unsettling physical anomalies, do we have to treat those local legends as substantive historical data, or must they be dismissed entirely as the unsubstantiated rumors Mr. Harrison, the history teacher, calls them?
Right.
I'm going to argue that these non-empirical details, they actually constitute essential, if unconventional, historical evidence that works to fill the massive gaps the official records choose to leave open.
And I'll be maintaining that rigorous skepticism, exactly the kind Elara brings to Blackwood, is mandatory. Allowing folklore to stand as historical fact simply because the official record is vague is, well, it's abandoning all principles of verification.
Okay.
The proper framework for approaching Blackwood's past, and really any historical setting, is summed up perfectly by Elara herself. I'm a scientist. I believe in things I can prove. The institution, through Mr. Harrison, provides what seems like the provable narrative. Tragedies occurred because, quote, life was harsher then. The history teacher explicitly labels the persistent stories as mere legends and tales to spook new students. You know, the school focuses on verifiable general misfortune, epidemics, and accidents. That's the official line.
Okay, I see why you rely on Mr. Harrison's classroom lecture, that official stance. But I'd frame the context a little differently. When the official history, taught by the institution itself, acknowledges mysterious disappearances in the school's infancy, well, that is an admission of failure in their own documentation, isn't it? The official record is vague precisely where it counts. It provides no resolution to those crises.
Vague, yes, but...
And furthermore, relying on Elara's initial, guarded cynicism as our only guide ignores the context of her arrival. She immediately experiences this unsettling chill just shaking Liam's hand. Now, you can dismiss that as subjective, fine. But then we have the shared, sudden, cold gust of wind, the one that extinguishes multiple candles and causes everyone there to shiver. That's not just one person's feeling. It's an environmental anomaly that I think challenges a purely scientific dismissal. It forces us to take the student folklore seriously, maybe as more than just character, perhaps as a continuous emotional testimony to unresolved events.
But we have to resist the temptation, don't we, jumping immediately to the paranormal for every unexplained draft. An old sprawling boarding school, especially one described as being in a remote wooded area, it's practically defined by poor insulation and drafts. A sudden temperature drop in an old building near a bonfire, that screams environmental factor to me, not, historical proof of a spectral presence. If the best evidence you're presenting is an emotional chill in a draft, the standard just feels far too low for proper historical analysis. Remember, Liam himself, the source of these stories in the scene, framed them as fun stories, just to give the place character. Why should we elevate his entertainment, his words, to the status of primary source material?
That's an interesting point about Liam's framing, yeah. But let's talk about the intent behind the official history for a second. The teachers need to actually smirk while calling the legends unsubstantiated. That suggests, to me at least, that they are deliberately kept outside the official record. They're inconvenient, perhaps? The legends, like Liam's very detailed mentions of the crying girl in the East Wing or the boy who walks through walls in the library, they provide the specificity that the official account, with its vague, mysterious disappearances, just completely lacks. It feels like the students are remembering the specific traumatic details the institution wants to generalize or even forget.
But that assumes institutional malice, or at the very least, an active cover-up. Shouldn't we stick to what we can actually prove? The institution dismisses the legends because they lack documentation. That seems straightforward, not necessarily because they are actively covering up, say, the faceless girl. Where's the proof of that intention?
Well, I think we need to look at physical evidence of alteration, which brings us directly to the artifact itself, the old, faded class photograph. For me, this is, well, it's the smoking gun. Elara is drawn to one specific figure from the early 1900s whose face is specifically described as blurred, almost scratched out. Now, that doesn't sound like natural fading or decay over time, does it? It reads like a focused, deliberate alteration of a primary source document about the school's past.
I'm sorry. I don't buy that it's definitive proof of suppression. That analysis relies so heavily on suggestion, on narrative foreshadowing within the story itself. Elara is logical, yes, but she's also in a highly evocative new environment. She's carrying this specific, personally significant heirloom, the old silver locket connected to her grandmother. She's emotionally receptive, you could argue, to the pervasive atmosphere. Her strange sense of familiarity with a damaged photo. That sounds like illogical, like projection. It connects to her personal story, yes, but not necessarily to historical truth. A photo scratched by, who knows, a bored student decades ago. It's still just a damaged artifact. Attributing it to an institutional cover-up requires us to accept the supernatural premise first and then fit the evidence.
But why that specific focused destruction? If it were just simple vandalism, wouldn't more faces be defaced? Wouldn't it be more random? The physical alteration of that one figure, specifically from the early 1900s, the very time of the mysterious disappearances, that acts as a powerful counter-narrative to the idea that these events were simply accidents or vague misfortunes. It strongly suggests a deliberate effort to erase a witness or perhaps a victim, lending immense weight to the idea that the faceless girl persists in folklore precisely because she was erased from the official record.
Okay. If we are moving past the standard institutional history and into the realm of anomaly, then yes, we need to talk about standards of proof for these physical effects. If the cumulative argument is our framework, we have to look at the strongest links.
Right.
And I still insist that the evidence for the specific ghosts named by Liam, the crying girl, the boy who walks through walls, is still purely circumstantial. If the best proof is a sudden cold draft, honestly, the standard of evidence is just far too low for serious academic analysis. We have to maintain conceptual clarity here. Until those environmental factors are definitively ruled out by measurable science, invoking restless spirits is premature. It's unscientific. The environmental explanation is elegant, it's simple. The supernatural explanation is complex and ultimately unprovable.
That's a compelling argument for simple elegance, I grant you that. But have you considered how the specificity of the narrative details, taken together, might actually outweigh the simplicity of the environmental argument?
Go on.
We have a skeptical student arriving with a mysterious, personalized heirloom. She experiences an unsettling chill upon physical contact with another student, Liam. Then she witnesses a shared, documented physical anomaly, the cold gust, that is specific enough to extinguish candles nearby. And finally, she identifies a visually suppressed figure in the historical record linked directly to the period of disappearances. This accumulation of highly specific, interlocking details, it shifts the debate, doesn't it? The legends, supported by these anomalies and the existence of major historical gaps, they're no longer mere rumor. They transition into viable alternative explanations for unresolved historical fact. Maybe the folklore isn't just decoration. Maybe it's a vital, living counter-archive to institutional silence.
I see the pattern you're drawing. I grant you that the physical environment provides a plausible explanation for the cold, yes. But I concede that still doesn't easily account for the scratched-out photograph. If the school is actively censoring its visual history, that does suggest the tragedy wasn't simply due to life being harsher then,
but perhaps due to a specific, localized trauma that someone wanted forgotten.
Exactly.
And yet, if we accept the legends as history based on this, we risk abandoning the basic principles of historical verification entirely. For me, the only thing this material definitively confirms is the powerful psychological effect Blackwood has on a receptive individual like Elara, especially one carrying an heirloom with personal significance. It confirms the power of the story, absolutely, but not the verifiability of the history within it. We must, I think, side with the scientist who believes only in things she can prove.
Or perhaps we're refining the definition of historical verification itself here. We are confronting the limitations of relying solely on institutionally generated documents, especially when those documents have clear gaps, where the official history ends with vague and unresolved, mysterious disappearances. The student folklore begins, providing the specificity and maybe the emotional depth needed to understand the trauma of that period. And that folklore is then corroborated, potentially, by physical effects that defy easy dismissal as simple drafts, and by alterations to the record.
The value of this material, then, lies in observing that tension, that friction between objective documentation and personal, unsettling experience. The debate confirms that the best foundational approach probably remains one of rigorous, reasoned skepticism, acknowledging that the legends primarily serve, as Liam said, to give the old place character, rather than providing verifiable facts about the school's tragic past. The burden of proof, for me, remains high.
Conversely, I'd argue, we established that the history of Blackwood Academy is characterized by significant, unresolved historical gaps. Those mysterious disappearances are acknowledged fact. The specific physical anomalies, and particularly the unsettling damage to the historical photograph, suggest that the student folklore functions as a necessary, if challenging, counter-narrative to the institution's official, perhaps sanitized history. Understanding the full scope of this tragedy might require accepting that purely empirical data isn't the only form of evidence available, especially when the events themselves might have been intentionally obscured.
A necessary challenge, then, to the limitations of official records.
Indeed. And the listener must weigh the strength of that compelling